Welcome to Class Online School. In Class Online School, we deliver educational stuffs. And so I'm your teacher for today, and I'm going to take you civic education. And so we're going to take it step by step. First, we want to know what civic education means. But before we know what civic education means, we want to know what is civics. That will help you to know what civic education is. So our subject today is civic education. Civic education was born out of that word civics. And what is civics? It is your duty, your right as a citizen. And now when we try to combine civic and education, then education added to it means the study of your duties, your rights, your responsibility as a citizen. Why was citizenship education introduced into the Nigerian educational system, or civic introduced into the Nigerian educational system? It was noted that most young persons, even adults, do not even know their right as a citizen. And they don't even know what their obligation, their duties as a citizen is. And so, to be able to tackle that problem, this subject, civic education, was introduced into our educational system to make us to be self-conscious, that self-awareness of what your society requires of you. I want to take a more broader definition of what civic education is. It has to do with having the awareness, the self-consciousness, that responsibility, that duty, the right you have as a citizen. That is what civic education is all about. But there is need for us to know our rights. That is the scope of civic education. And then the reasons of civic education. So we're going to take three elements. Number one, what is civic education? Two, important stroke objective of civic education. Then number three, the scope of civic education. I have tried to explain what civic education is. And so having known what civic education is, now we're going to move on to the importance, the objectives, the reasons why you and I need civic education. Number one, your responsibility as an individual. Then another thing is your responsibility to the states or to your nations. Now let us take it one at a time. Number one, your responsibility is as an individual. As an individual, there are rights that you possess. And so knowing that is very important. For example, your freedom. Freedom to speak, freedom to do things as a citizen of a country. That's another thing. Then, as a citizen of a country, your right to vote, your right to do some other public service that is required of you as an individual, all of these make civic education important. And why we need this educational system is because, one, it gives you the self-consciousness, the self-awareness that you belong to this state or the nation. Secondly, it helps you to promote peace, unity among citizenry. Then, thirdly, you know what the government expects of you. Then another thing is for you to know your fundamental human right as a citizen. Another thing you need to know is to know the different branches of government that exist in your nation and how that can help you. And as youth, civic education helps you to imbibe the leadership quality that every person needs to possess. As youth, we are involved in one service or the other, and we are supposed to render some sort of philanthropic service or voluntary service to the nation where we belong to. Now let me give an example of how self-awareness, self-consciousness can help us. For example, every individual is expected to keep his environment clean. The government expects that, and you as an individual know that it is a right you possess and you need to give yourself that. So civic education puts you in an area where you are able to know all you are required to do as a citizen. And another thing that citizenship education or civic education help us is to help us understand that we need to maintain peace. You find out today that peace, it's actually not something we have in common in all our ethnic groups. And so civic education will help us to know that really there is need for peace and unity among member states, among every individual that exists in a nation. That is one consciousness, one awareness that civic education gives to us. And another thing is, as a youth, what are those things you are expected to do and those you are not expected to do? Remember when I was introducing this course, I told you, knowing the right thing and doing the right thing is a good thing. But when you don't know the right thing, you will not know how to do the right thing. So, civic education gives you the self-awareness to know the right thing and do the right thing at the appropriate time. That is what civic education helps you to know about. There are so many other ones. But what about to yourself as an individual? Everyone has a right. The civic education helps you to know that your right might be limited at some point in time when you don't do the right thing that is expected of you as a member of a particular nation. For example, a nation, Nigeria, there are things that you ought not to do. And so knowing those you ought not to do will help you to do what is right. And that is it for the objective. There are a lot of objectives. I will try to summarize them as I give you a brief chalkboard summary. And we are going to the third point. The third point has to do with the scope of civic education. When we talk about scope, it means what does this subject covers? What does it scope covers? What are those things that are covered in this subject area? Number one is for you to know what civic education is all about, the meaning. Number two is to know your rights. The third one is how you can survive in a democratic society. Then we'll talk about human trafficking, child trafficking, and the rest of it all. Then there is another kind of traffic. Remember, there is difference between trafficking and traffic. Trafficking has to do with the illegal movement of individuals, and traffic has to do with how are you supposed to conduct yourself in an area that there is rule on how your movement has to go. How does that work? Then another thing is your right to vote. When you are supposed to vote, when you are not supposed to vote, who is supposed to vote, who is not supposed to vote. Your fundamental human rights, your freedom. Freedom to speech, freedom to other things. When your freedom is restricted and when your freedom is given to you. These are many other things are what we are going to cover in this number 3. And so by and large, I know students that today you have been able to understand what civic education is and how it was born into our educational system. If I try to recap it, remember, many persons do not know their civic rights. They don't know what they are supposed to do as an individual. So for them to know what it's required of them, this educational system will help you to know who you are as a citizen of a particular country. Our case study is Nigeria being our country. What are you supposed to know? And remember that civic education has to do with your duties, your rights, your obligation as a citizen. So all, in totality, what you as an individual have to do for your country, for your state, for your community, for your local environment. That is what civic education is. Then we'll talk about the importance. As a young folk, you need civic education. Number one, to know what you have to do as a member of a particular country. Let's take Nigeria for example. A member of a Nigeria as a nation, you know what to do and what not to do. Another thing is, it helps you to develop your leadership quality as an individual. Leadership is not just by words. There are characteristics, quality an individual have to possess. And so those qualities, those characteristics that makes you a better leader, you will know that it's a part of the importance of civic education. Then another thing you will have to understand why we need civic education is that peace needs to be promoted among Nigerians. Civic education will help you to know how you can promote peace in your own land, in your own motherland. Another importance of it is how you will be able to protect your state and yourself. The territories of the state need to be protected. As an individual, as a youth, you need to learn about what this means. Another reason why we need civic education. Civic education helps the individual to know about the values, the cultures, the ideas, the knowledge, plans, activities that an individual needs to carry out. Another thing is, it helps students to develop that consciousness of what they are supposed to do for their nation as Nigeria is. What you as an individual needs to do in order to contribute your own quarter to develop or help in the enhancement of this country. Then it's aimed at inculcating in the student the sense of patriotism, statesmanship, and philanthropy. That is another thing civic education helps us to do. And so these are some of the importance of citizenship education. I want to go over to the third point I told you we are going to cover in this subject, which has to do with the scope of civic education. When I mean scope, I mean the totality of what we are supposed to learn, what we are supposed to know about civic education. Civic education covers a large range of subjects. Number one of such, it has to help you to know about your civic duties, civic responsibilities, and civic rights. That is one thing. Then another thing is, there are a lot of diseases that we're experiencing. It can be an outbreak of an epidemic. But the number one health challenge Nigerians have is HIV. So we're going to tackle the issue of HIV, what causes it, how it can be avoided, and stuff like that. Then, human trafficking. A lot of Nigeria leave the shores of Nigeria to other countries to look for greener pasture. You will know about the implication, the disadvantage of why such might be detrimental to you as an individual. Another thing we will cover in this scope has to do with your political rights, your right to vote, your right to be voted for, and your right to vote somebody into office. That is another thing that the scope entails. There is one thing that is actually eating down into the educational system, cultism. We know how it all got started, how you as a young folk have to avoid this problem that is actually eating down into our society and causing so many havoc to the young folk. Some persons have become so useless that they don't even know their civic right as it involves cultism. So we'll talk about cultism, drug abuse. Drug abuse have been very common among the youths. In this course, civic education, we are going to know why drug abuse is very bad, the health challenges involved, what it damages to your body system, how it makes you behave, and why you, as a child, as a student, need to stay away from drug abuse. Then, responsibility as a parent. Every one of us might at one time or will at one time become a parent. How can you be a good parent? How can you carry out your parental role in such a way that you will build a good foundation for your children, and how you will be able to be well disciplined as a child? That is another thing that civic education will help you to know. Interpersonal relationship has been an issue. How do you relate with others? How do you relate with your environment? How do you relate with your nation? How do you relate with your classmates? How do you relate with life in general? Some people fail and they think the world is crashing on them. Some people fail and they fail forward. Relationship with self and relationship with others will be dealt with in the course of our subject. Then, communal relationship. You will agree with me that this subject will actually take you far. It will help you to know so many things you don't know about. It will help you to become self-aware of who you are, what you need to do for yourself, what you need to do for the state, what you need to do for the nation, what you need to do for the environment. But before I go, I would like you to do something for me before we meet next time. I want to leave some questions that you're going to ponder over, read before we meet next time. Make sure you do it so that you will benefit from this class. So number one, you're going to explain what civic education means. Then two, you will list 5 reasons why we need civic education. Then the last one, the scope of civic education. Please, students, try to cover this area. Try as much as possible to do this assignment. If you do that, you'll find out that you've covered all that we've discussed today. And remember, this is a common question in your WAEC. So please, do it and you'll be happy you did. So that will be all for today. Until we see you next time.